The alarm clock didn't even need to ring anymore. He woke up before it, every single time. Same hour, same second, 6:06 a.m. Sweat on his chest, breath caught in his throat, like he had been drowning in a nightmare, except this nightmare wasn't ending. It was waiting. Darnell stared at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above him, the only thing that ever seemed to move forward in his world. He was 22, a college student, a brother, a son, a black man in America, and he had died more times than he could count. Every day started the same. The city outside buzzed with indifferent life, buses growling, car horns screaming, dogs barking like they knew something was wrong. In the hallway, his mother's voice called, "Darnell, baby, I made you breakfast." He didn't answer right away. He sat on the edge of his bed, looking down at his hands. Were they shaking again? Still stained in blood from yesterday? No, clean, always clean. The loop reset everything, except him. He walked to the bathroom, brushed his teeth, looked in the mirror. His eyes were tired, not from sleep, from remembering, from dying. Yesterday, he'd been shot 3 times in the back while running from a cop who claimed he matched the description. The day before that, suffocated by a knee. Before that, tossed until his heart stopped. And before that, he didn't even remember. It blurred. Each death was different. Each cop knew. But the ending? Always the same. He grabbed his backpack, zipped it, and took a breath like a man walking into war. Outside, the air felt wrong, heavy, still. He stepped onto the porch of the worn-down house on 48th Street. Across the street, a police cruiser. 2 white officers leaned on it like they owned the block. One of them, young, buzzcut, with mirrored sunglasses, looked up the moment Darnell appeared. The other one smirked. "Morning," Darnell said quietly, nodding. No sudden moves, no hands in pockets. He'd learned. "Where you headed, boy?" the younger cop said, pushing off the car. Darnell showed his college ID. College, same as yesterday. The cop didn't even look at the card, just stepped closer. "You sure you're not ditching parole?" "I've never been arrested." "Not yet." And just like that, it began. The second cop circled behind him. Darnell felt the tension snap like a tripwire. His heartbeat pounded. "Not again. Please, not again." But it didn't matter what he said, or didn't say. "On your knees," barked the cop. "I didn't do anything," Darnell whispered. Gun drawn. A scream. And darkness. He screamed, but no sound came out. Then darkness, again. But not silence. Never silence. The loop didn't allow him peace, even in death. Darnell didn't fall into nothingness. He fell into static, into flashes, into a place between dying and waking up, filled with sirens, lights, gunshots, blurred voices yelling hands where I can see him. And always, always, the cold feeling of metal on his skin. And then, breath. Violent, gasping breath. His eyes snapped open. 6:06 a.m. He was in bed again, sweat-soaked sheets, the ceiling fan turning lazily above him, slicing the air like a slow-motion blade. He didn't scream this time. He just lay there, frozen, eyes wide open. The scream was inside now, permanent. He waited 10 minutes before he sat up. His chest burned. His fingers twitched. "I won't go out today." It wasn't a decision. It was a survival tactic, one he'd already tried. But maybe if he didn't go out this time, stayed completely invisible, he could break the cycle. Maybe the system only saw him when he moved. He walked to the window, slowly peeled back the blinds. The same police car, across the street, just sitting there, watching. He didn't eat breakfast, didn't speak to his mother, didn't brush his teeth. He locked his door, turned off the lights, hid his phone, pulled his desk chair in front of the door, sat there in the darkness. He breathed through his nose, counted every second. 10 minutes. 30. An hour. 2. It was working. He heard voices in the street, radios, footsteps, but no knock, no siren, no shouting. He was invisible. He almost smiled. And then, the crash. A battering ram slammed into the front door. His mother screamed. Wood splintered. Heavy boots stomped. "Down. Get down. Hands up." "No, no, not again. Not inside." Darnell stood up slowly, arms raised, shaking. "Please, I didn't call anyone. I haven't left." A boot kicked his bedroom door open. A flashlight blinded him, red laser dot on his chest. "Gun," someone yelled. "What?" "Shots." 3. And then silence. The room smelled of cordite and sweat. His mother's screams became sobs. The police shouted something about a mistake, wrong address. He heard someone say, shit, he was unarmed. But it didn't matter. The loop had rules, and one of them was clear. You don't survive. Not here. Not like this. Let's take a short pause. If you're watching this, let us know in the comments where you're listening from, and if anything like this has ever happened in your life. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next parts of our stories. We continue. He couldn't stop shaking. The sound of the shots still echoed in his bones, even after death. He was sure he'd screamed when it happened, but the loop didn't carry sound, only memory. Only that final moment where he locked eyes with the cop and thought, he's really gonna do it again. Then nothing. And then, breath. Gasping. Eyes opened. 6:06 a.m. Again. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stared at the ceiling, wondering what piece of the puzzle he'd missed. Staying inside didn't work. Doing nothing didn't work. Being silent, invisible, afraid didn't work. Maybe it was the clothes. Maybe if he didn't look like what they feared, like what they hated, he'd survive. He threw away his hoodie, put on a button-up shirt, beige, ironed it, wore khaki pants, polished shoes, combed his hair back, no headphones, no sagging jeans, no hood, no movement that could be misinterpreted. He looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, someone who smiled even when he didn't want to, someone harmless. He left the house at 7:12 a.m. Sunlight was soft, birds chirping. He walked carefully, calmly, greeted the old white lady walking her dog. She nodded, smiled politely. He smiled back, just enough. 2 blocks later, a police cruiser slowed next to him. Darnell stopped, hands visible, shoulders low, no sudden movements. The window rolled down. You live around here? The cop asked. His voice was casual, but his eyes weren't. Yes, sir, just a few blocks down, on Monroe. You mind if I ask you a few questions? Not at all, he answered calmly, softly, everything he'd read in the survival guides. Don't escalate, stay polite, no slang, eye contact, but not too much. He even thanked the officer for his service. The cop nodded, waved him off. Darnell walked away, heart pounding, but it worked. It worked. Until the second cruiser pulled up. Hey, stop right there. He turned. Another officer, younger, pale, eyes wide like he'd just stepped into a war zone. I already spoke with an officer, Darnell said, slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them. I am. Get down. Get, please. The young cop fired. Twice. Darnell fell backward. People screamed. The older cop shouted, Why the hell did you shoot? He reached. I thought. I didn't. Darnell's vision blurred. He'd done everything right. He looked safe. But that didn't change who he was. And in this loop, that was always a death sentence. He woke up gasping again. 6:06 a.m. Same air, same bed, same fucking curse. This time, he didn't scream. He just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, fists clenched. If they were going to kill him no matter what, then maybe he had to outsmart them. Maybe the key was distance. That day, he texted his old classmate, Liam. They hadn't talked in a year. Liam was white, lived in the suburbs, fenced lawns, joggers, Starbucks on every corner. A place where cops waved instead of reached for their guns. Darnell didn't explain everything, just said he needed a place to crash. Rough times. Liam said sure. So he left the hood. Took the long way. Avoided buses. Wore clean clothes again. Eyes down. No music. At every crosswalk, every corner, he imagined sirens. But they didn't come. By 9:42 a.m., he was on Liam's porch. Big house. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where fear hides in the carpets. Liam opened the door smiling. Damn, it's been forever, bro. Darnell smiled back, but there was a tremor in it. Liam's parents weren't home. They talked, ate cereal, watched dumb TV. For a while, Darnell let himself forget. For a few hours, he felt like a human again. But by 1:03 p.m., the neighborhood had noticed. An older white neighbor walked past the house twice, slowly. A jogger slowed down, looked. A delivery guy knocked on the wrong door, twice. Then the knock came. 3 hard raps on the door. And the sound that made Darnell's blood freeze, radios, police radios. Liam opened the door. 2 officers stood there. Everything okay here? One of them asked. But it wasn't a question. He was staring past Liam, straight at Darnell. Liam blinked. Yeah, this is my friend Darnell. He's just visiting. Mind if we come in? Liam hesitated. Is there a problem? We got a call about a suspicious male in the area. Darnell stepped forward, heart thudding. I live in the city. I'm just here for the day. Do you have ID? Yes. He handed it over, hands slow, careful. They took it, whispered into the radio. And then, step outside, please. Why? Liam asked. He didn't do anything. We just want to ask him some questions. Standard procedure. Darnell met Liam's eyes. There was fear there now, and confusion, and guilt. He stepped outside. The door closed behind him. The officers led him to the sidewalk. And just like that, the routine began. Hands on the wall, legs apart, pat down. A third cruiser arrived. He's not under arrest, one of them said, just being detained for questioning. A neighbor filmed, from a safe distance. Another neighbor whispered on the phone. Within minutes, Darnell was in the back of the car. Liam stood on the porch, helpless, pale. He screamed through the glass. You said I could go, you said. The cop in the front just looked at him through the mirror and said, you don't belong here, no matter how you dress, or where you hide. Then Darnell saw the gun. The world went white again. And the clock reset. The scream died in his throat. White flash, then darkness, then breath. 6:06 a.m. He bolted upright in bed. Sweat drenched the sheets. His body trembled, but not from fear, from rage. He had played their game. He had stayed calm. He had kept his head down. And still they came for him. Now he would stop waiting, stop hiding. Today, he would fight to live, even if it killed him again. He didn't take the usual route. He dressed differently, hoodie off, button-up shirt. He walked straight, purposeful, like he belonged. And yet, every glance felt like a knife. People stepped aside. Women clutched their purses. A man locked his car door without breaking eye contact. The whole world was made of suspicion. By 10:20 a.m., he was in the park, wide, open, green, a place where families brought their kids, where people walked dogs and fed ducks. He sat on a bench and tried to breathe. But then came the officer. Young, buzz cut, hand already hovering over his gun. Sir, you doing okay? Darnell didn't answer. The cop tilted his head. I asked you a question. I'm sitting, in public. That illegal? The officer's eyes narrowed. Can I see some ID? No. You refusing to comply? I'm tired, Darnell said. Tired of dying. Tired of waking up to the same nightmare. The officer stepped closer. What did you just say? Darnell stood up. Not threatening, just done. Go ahead. Kill me again. You'll just have to do it tomorrow, too. The cop reached for his belt. And Darnell ran. He ran like his soul was on fire. Through the trees, across the fields, past shocked joggers and frozen children. Sirens wailed. Voices screamed, stop, stop or we'll shoot. But Darnell didn't stop. Because he knew stopping meant dying. And this time, he wanted them to earn it. He ducked behind a dumpster, lungs screaming, heart pounding. Footsteps, barking, radios crackling. They were closing in. He grabbed a rock. It wasn't a weapon, it was a statement. When they found him, 5 guns pointed at his chest. He raised the rock high above his head. Do it, he screamed. Make it count this time. They fired. The world exploded. But the sun still rose. And the clock reset. We're going to take a brief pause here. We hope you're finding these chapters impactful and thought-provoking. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next part of the story. Your feedback is always appreciated. Let us know where you're listening from, and if you've had any experiences related to this story. Now, let's continue. Darnell hadn't planned it. He hadn't planned to stop running, to stop hiding, but after the 3rd time, after the 5th, after every single time they knocked him down and walked away with his dignity, he realized one thing: they couldn't kill what they couldn't see. So, he made a choice. He would show them. His phone was a small thing, cracked at the edges, but it worked. It worked well enough to capture everything. The camera recorded as Darnell stepped into the street, eyes wide, chest heaving. He stood at the very center of the road and hit the record button. Let them come, he whispered to himself. Let them see. Let them hear. Let the whole world hear what happens when a black man steps out in broad daylight and does not cower. Minutes passed. The sun burned overhead, hot and relentless. His skin, dark as it was, glistened with sweat. Then came the sirens. This time, no run, no hiding, no ducking behind dumpsters, no scrambling to disappear. The first squad car pulled up slowly, its tires skimming the cracked pavement. Another one followed, a third, and then more. They surrounded him, their doors slamming with that same echo he'd heard 100 times before. The same officers. "You sure you want to do this?" the officer with the buzz cut asked, standing just a few feet away, his hand still resting on the grip of his gun. "I don't want to do anything," Darnell replied, eyes locked with the officer. "But I'm gonna." A second officer moved closer, his hand shaking as he reached for his weapon. "I'm not afraid of you," Darnell muttered. "I'm not afraid of any of you." They started shouting commands, so familiar, so rehearsed. "Step away from the vehicle. Put your hands where we can see them." But Darnell didn't move. The camera was still recording, his thumb pressing the button with a quiet defiance. The officer's voice grew louder. "You think this is funny? I think it's tragic," Darnell said quietly. Before he knew what happened, the world exploded into violence. One officer lunged at him, a blur of motion. Another raised his baton. A crowd had gathered now, drawn by the commotion, watched with wide eyes. Some filmed, others stood frozen, some turned away in disgust. "Get on the ground," one officer screamed. But Darnell didn't go down. A blow to the face sent him staggering, but he didn't fall. A second hit knocked him back against the car. And then, they all piled on. The phone clattered to the ground, still recording. The officers didn't stop. They never stopped. The camera captured every punch, every strike. It caught the sound of bones cracking, the air thick with pain. But through it all, through the sounds of grunts and punches, there was something else. Darnell's voice. Shouting. Screaming. Yelling for justice. For mercy. For freedom. But they didn't care. They never cared. The world would see it. The world would know. But what would it change? He was suffocating. The camera kept rolling. And the streets would remember. The video didn't stay in the shadows long. Less than a few hours after the beating, the footage was everywhere. Social media. News outlets. Private groups and public forums. The world couldn't turn its head fast enough to avoid it. At first, the reactions were predictable: disbelief, shock, anger. But as the hours turned to days, something else began to shift. People weren't just angry. They were terrified. They were disgusted. And most importantly, they were questioning everything they thought they knew about their own country. The hashtag spread like wildfire, hashtag justice for Darnell. It was everywhere. On billboards. On streets. In schools. At the dinner table. Everyone had an opinion. And the police? The police tried to bury it. They tried to sweep it under the rug, as they always had before. But it was too late. The video had broken something inside of them. And once that crack appeared, the walls came down. Protests erupted in cities across the country. Massive crowds gathered, shouting, demanding justice, demanding answers. And somewhere in the crowd, Darnell's mother stood, holding a sign that read, "My son isn't a criminal, he's a human." Darnell's name was everywhere now. His face. His blood. All of it was being dissected by millions of strangers, but it didn't matter. They had seen what they wanted to see. They had seen him get beaten. And they had seen what happened when a man refused to be afraid anymore. For Darnell, however, nothing changed. He was still trapped in that same world. Still locked in that same cage. Still waiting for the next round of pain, the next beating. Except now, the eyes of the world were on him. The officers who had beaten him remained silent, hiding behind their uniforms, behind the blue wall. They stayed inside their own lives, pretending the storm would pass, pretending that the social media outrage was just a fleeting moment. But it wasn't. The pressure was mounting. And now, it wasn't just Darnell's life on the line, it was theirs too. Across the country, a new conversation was beginning to emerge. People were standing up. They were no longer willing to remain silent. They were no longer afraid. The officers had taken everything from Darnell. His pride, his dignity, his faith in the system. They had humiliated him in front of a world that would never care, never understand. But Darnell had learned something in all of this. He had learned that silence was death. And sometimes, the only way to survive was to make noise. Darnell didn't die that day. He didn't die at the hands of the officers. He didn't fall to the ground, shattered, broken, a casualty of a system too broken to protect him. No, he lived. But in a way, that survival was a kind of death in itself. The world had seen him. It had watched him, with their eyes wide, their hearts torn. They had seen the violence, the brutality, the truth that many had been willing to ignore. And yet, despite the footage, despite the protests, the outrage, the marches, the petitions, Darnell remained invisible to the system. The officers who had beaten him, they were suspended for further investigation. They were placed on administrative leave. It wasn't justice. It was a delay. It was a mockery of what was deserved. As days turned into weeks, the protests only grew. The signs, the chants, the raised fists. They filled every city, every town. People shouted for change, for action, for accountability. But still, nothing moved. Nothing changed. In the court of public opinion, Darnell was a martyr. He was a symbol. A face on a poster, a name and a hashtag. But to the officers? He was just another statistic. And yet, in his heart, Darnell found peace in a strange way. Not the peace of silence. Not the peace of submission. No, this was the peace of defiance. Because even though the system refused to bend, refused to break, refused to listen, the people had heard him. They had heard him loud and clear. The world had seen him stand. The world had seen him not fall. Darnell was more than his bruises. He was more than the pain they had inflicted on him. He was the voice of every person who had ever been ignored, every person who had ever been silenced by their own fear or the weight of history. And he was a force that no badge or gun could ever erase. The day Darnell walked out of the courthouse, the day the video became a global conversation, a fire that couldn't be put out, was the day everything started to change. Not for him, not in the way he had hoped, but for the future. For the people who would come after him. The officers who beat him were never truly held accountable, but the movement they sparked was something the world could not ignore. It grew louder. It grew stronger. It reached corners of society that no one thought would ever listen. The hashtag Justice for Darnell didn't fade away. It lived on, not just as a name, but as a reminder that silence was a luxury the world could no longer afford. In the years that followed, the conversations never stopped. There were new protests, new policies. Darnell's name became something more than a tragedy. It became a symbol of resistance. Darnell walked out of the courthouse, not a free man in the legal sense, but a free man in spirit. And even though the system had not bent to his will, his legacy had already begun to change the world. His scars were still there, but so was his strength. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fair. But it was real. And that was something.